We are now going to start making our genoise. This particular formula calls for something called brown butter, otherwise known as beurre noisette. To make beurre noisette, you take your butter, place it in a saucepan, and cook it. We're going to cook this until it turns a lovely deep brown. This process does several things. It turns the butter into more like an oil, so therefore when it is added into the mixture, it behaves more like oil than it does butter. The browning is also a caramelization of the sugar that's present in milk called lactose. Caramel is always good flavor. We also brown the milk protein that is inside the butter, which develops our flavor. The genoise recipe provided can also be made simply with melted whole butter. To make brown butter, simply place it in the pot and bring it to a boil. Allow it to cook until the butter begins to turn brown and you begin to smell the smell of roasted nuts. That's the reason that brown butter has its French name, beurre noisette hazelnut butter. As the butter begins to cook, all of the milk solids, lactose, and milk proteins begin to turn brown, and the water begins to evaporate out with steam. When you make brown butter, you lose some of it through evaporation and also when we strain out the solids. Therefore, you need to brown more butter than what you're actually going to use. And strain it through a strainer into a heat-proof bowl. Allow this to cool before adding it to your cake. The first step in making the genoise is to create the egg foam, which is the leavening in this particular cake. Place your eggs and your sugar into a heat-proof bowl. Then place over a simmering water bath. You're going to start to whisk the eggs and the sugar together, heating it over a hot water bath. Be sure to get the water good and hot, however, not so hot that the steam pours up over the sides and burns your hands. You have to mix constantly when doing this so that the egg proteins do not cook and cling to the bottom of the bowl. We're doing this for two purposes. One, we want to be sure to dissolve all the sugar in the egg foam to make it stronger. And two, because a warm egg mixture will whip with better volume than a cool egg mixture. Genoise is a classical cake used as a base for a lot of desserts. It can be split and filled with jam, buttercream, or other fillings. It is also used at the bottom of frozen desserts. It can be used as piped and made into lady fingers to go around the edges of cakes. Genoise is a good structural cake because being made with an egg foam, it has a lot of protein and it has a fairly strong structure. It can be soaked heavily with a nice flavored syrup. This cake is also used as the base for a baked Alaska. Genoise was originally thought to have been developed in the city of Genoa in Italy back in the 1700s. Occasionally, you want to stop and check the temperature of your egg foam. The ideal temperature for an egg foam is going to be 110 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, the egg proteins have loosened enough that they'll make a nice network for the air bubbles to be trapped in, but it's cool enough that they haven't begun to coagulate and tighten and won't cause poor volume in the final product. The next thing we have to do is continue to develop our egg foam. Place your egg mixture, that should be at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, into the mixing bowl. We're then going to place it on the mixer with a whip. Anytime your recipe says whip, you want to be sure to use a whisk. If your recipe calls for something to be mixed or beaten, then you always use a paddle. You want to turn your mixer on high to break it up and start building that volume. Once your volume has begun to build, you can then turn it down to medium-high and allow that foam to develop. A foam that is mixed on high the entire time will create lots of large air bubbles, and when you break one large air bubble, you lose a lot of volume. If you mix your mix on medium-high instead of full speed, you get lots of little bubbles, and when you break a little bubble, you don't lose a lot of your volume. We're now going to sift our dry ingredients. This recipe calls for cornstarch as well as cake flour. The cornstarch is added to this recipe because it contains no gluten, and gluten is the protein in flour that makes things tough. Gluten is very desirable when we make breads and products where we need that strong structure. However, it is not so desirable when we're making things that we want to be tender and light, like cakes and muffins. We are going to whip our egg foam until it reaches approximately 3 times its original volume. The bowl should also be completely cool to the touch. For one final check, we should be able to lift the whisk out, lift the egg foam, and be able to create a figure 8. A figure 8. This particular step, it's very helpful to have 2 people. Have somebody take the flour and cornstarch that was sifted and lightly start to sprinkle it in the bowl as you begin to fold. Folding is the process of going into the middle of the mixture and up the sides and folding what is at the bottom of the bowl, the mixture at the bottom of the bowl, over the flour. Continue the process, being careful not to knock down too much of your egg foam. Turning your bowl while you're folding helps you make sure that you scrape the bottom and the sides of the bowl. Occasionally, catch the edge of your bowl. Before all of your flour is mixed in, you want to add a little bit of your cake batter into your brown butter. This is tempering the mixture. We want to combine the butter, which is inclined to solidify, with a little bit of the mixture so that when we pour it back into the rest of the egg foam, it doesn't turn into hard little chunks of butter. Add the brown butter and continue to fold the mix just until the ingredients are combined. As soon as the ingredients are combined, you want to very lightly spray your cake pan with pan spray. Remember, pan spray is not an ingredient, it's just there to let the cake out. Line the bottom of your pan with a sheet of parchment that has been cut to fit the pan. And quickly place all of your genoise mix into your pan. Genoise does not rise much in the oven, so your cake will only be as tall as it is when you fill the pan. Take your cake and immediately put it in the oven. Because of the egg foam, this cake cannot sit.